Welcome to Vocab Unit 12. Your first root is loose or lewd, which means light. And your first word is allude. It's a verb, and it means to refer to casually or indirectly. So it's kind of like to hint at something. Your synonym gives you suggest, which is good. I would add to allude to something would be to hint at something. So this chef here is winking. And he's alluding to the fact that his food is good, right? So he's not saying outright the food is good, but his wink alludes to the fact that his food is good. Your sample sentence says, the popular police drama show on television frequently alluded to real-life criminal cases that had recently hit the headlines. So that means that there are purposeful similarities between the cases on the show and real-life cases. So it's hinting at what's happening in real life. You'll also notice this use of it alluded to is almost always how it's used. So the chef alludes to the fact that the food is good. You hear this word a lot with literature. So anytime you hear the phrase star-crossed lovers, that alludes to Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. It's kind of a reference to it that you're expected to pick up on. Your next word is elucidate. It's a verb, and it means to explain or to make clear. Your sample sentence is, the English teacher could see that his students were confused, so he tried to elucidate the meaning of the poem. So he explained it further to elucidate that meaning. E means out of, so elucidate is like to bring out the light. So if you think about the light bulb as a symbol of an idea. When you elucidate something, you make it clear, you clarify. So you might say that this guy over here first had an idea that wasn't clear, and then he elucidated his idea, or he elucidated his thinking, and he made it clearer. Your next word is nihil, which means nothing. Your first word is annihilate. It is a verb, and it means to destroy completely. This can be in the literal sense of a bomb annihilating an entire city. It can also be in a figurative sense, as in you annihilate your opponent in a game. So, for example, in this picture over here, we have the white team has been annihilated. Your sample sentence says, overnight, the rabbits annihilated the vegetable garden, eating nearly all of the carrots and cabbage. So they left nothing in the garden. They annihilated it. Your second word is nihilist, which is a noun, and it is a person who believes in the total rejection of established laws and institutions. I would also add on to that a nihilist believes that life has no meaning. So a nihilistic outlook is one that is generally criticized, that philosophers will accuse other people of being nihilists. But very few people would actually self-identify as a nihilist, because if you are a nihilist, you believe that nothing you do matters, nothing anyone else does matters. You could be violent, you could be kind, there is no difference, it does not matter. So again, not a great life philosophy. Your sample sentence says he had started out as a member of the student council during his freshman year at college, but he quickly became bitter against all political structures and became a nihilist. So again, arising out of pessimism, not something that people want to be. Your next root is greg, which means group. And your first word is congregate, which is a verb. It means to come together or gather, especially in large numbers. So these frogs over here have congregated. Your noun form of congregate is congregation, which can be a large group of people. Frogs, there's a congregation of frogs there. Your sample sentence says, for the final 4 or 5 minutes of lunch period every day, students congregate in the lobby outside of the cafeteria waiting for the bell. So a large group of people coming together would be congregating. Your next word is egregious, which means remarkably bad. I would add to the antonyms here the word inconsequential. So like we talked in last unit about inconsequential errors, the opposite of an inconsequential error is an egregious error. So it is terrible, it is very bad. If you see this picture, that looks like an egregious error or a terrible error. The sample sentence also talks about egregious mistakes. So Glenn winced at the egregious mistakes that his son was making at the piano recital, so terrible mistakes. But you could also be an egregious liar, for example, if you are if you lie so much that it is remarkably bad. Your next root is gen, which means a people or an ethnic group. Genealogy is your first word. It's a noun and is the ancestry of a person, family, or group of people. The sample sentence tells you how you would most often use it. So it says her study of her family's genealogy taught her that her family had Spanish roots and not just the Italian background that she had always known. So you would study your genealogy, or you would be interested in your genealogy. You could investigate your genealogy. You may remember, it reminds you have that logi, right? It's the study of, right? So you are interested in studying your family's genealogy. This picture here shows that if you're studying your genealogy, you'd be figuring out what parts of the world your family is from. Your next root is indigenous, which is an adjective and means of a particular region. Native is a good synonym for it. And your helpful hint reminds you that the word can be used to describe animals or plants as well as people. So indigenous people are people who have their roots in a certain area. Indigenous animals and indigenous plants would be ones that are naturally from that area, so not ones that were brought in from elsewhere. Your sample sentence tells you, because it is one of the most widespread indigenous birds of Massachusetts, the chickadee was declared the state bird. In this picture over here, you have indigenous people and indigenous animals. So the people are Quechua women, and the Quechua people are indigenous to Peru. And you also have alpacas, which are animals that are indigenous to Peru. Your next root is grad or gress, which means step. And your first word is gradual, which is an adjective, and it means taking place little by little. So over here, this is a gradual slope. It's not a very steep hill. You often hear gradual talking about slopes. You also hear gradual talking about changes. So a gradual change is a slow one, whereas a rapid change takes place over time. Your sample sentence says, if you practice something every day, you will not become an expert all at once, but you will notice a steady, gradual improvement. Your next word, is regress, which is a verb, and it means either to move backward or to revert to a less advanced state. The you may remember reminds you that re means back, so when you regress, you take a step backwards. You often hear this in talking about children's development. So if children will often go through a stage where they're really friendly and outgoing, and then they might regress and become much shyer. Or they might grow past sucking their thumb, and then something difficult might happen in their life, and then they would regress and start sucking their thumb again. So it's like you are advancing, and then when you regress, you're taking that step backwards. Which literally the re means back, gress means step. It's a step backwards. Your sample sentence says, she was surprised at how much her Japanese language skills had regressed. It had only been 15 months since she had last stayed in Kyoto, and she was barely able to communicate with the locals. So if you don't use a language, your skills will regress. You'll take a step back and you'll have to relearn. I have a cigarette here because you can also regress when you are overcoming bad habits. So if someone quits smoking and then they regress, it means they're going back to that bad habit. Your next root is nim, which means name. Your first word is a homonym, and it's a noun, and it's a word that is spelled and pronounced exactly the same as another word, but carries a different meaning. So what's important about homonym is it is spelled and pronounced exactly the same. So a homophone is a word that has the same sound, but it's not spelled exactly the same. So this picture over here shows you the difference between a homophone and a homonym. So there are two statements here. So this man has bare arms, meaning that he's wearing short sleeves, right? So those are his bare arms. He is also bearing arms, which means to carry a gun, right? So we have two uses of bear here, and those are homophones. Bear and bear, they sound the same, but they're spelled different. Arms and arms, one referring to a part of his body and one referring to the gun, Those are spelled the same and sound the same. So those are homonyms. They have entirely the same name, right, nym, whereas these two just have the same sound and phonous sound. All right, your sample sentence for homonym is the sentence, "The duck had to duck under the bridge," contains a pair of homonyms, right? A duck and he's ducking, so the animal and the action. Your next word is misnomer. It is a noun, and it is an inaccurate or oddly chosen name. Your sample sentence says that Boston College is actually a university, not a college, and in Chestnut Hill, not Boston. So the school's name is a misnomer on 2 counts. This little guy over here is often called a koala bear, but he is not actually a bear, so that is also a misnomer. The root medi means middle, and your first word for that root is mediate. It's a verb. It means to settle a dispute between 2 parties. So you'll see as one of your synonyms there, intercede. So this is when this person here is the mediator. These 2 people are trying to argue with each other, and the mediator says, "Hang on, let's sit down. We need to talk about this." So that person is mediating the fight. Your sample sentence is, "The friend had to mediate between his 2 close friends who were having a long and difficult disagreement." Your next word is mediocre. It is an adjective. It means average or ordinary. So mediocre it's not a compliment. It's not something you want to be called. It's like, you're okay, you're not terrible, you're not great. This giant C over here, C plus, is a mediocre grade, right? It's okay, it's passing, it's not great. Your sample sentence says, "The Wolves had yet another mediocre season, finishing with 10 wins and 10 losses and missing the playoffs yet again," right? So you're 500, you've won 10, you've lost 10. It's not the worst, it's not the best, it's just mediocre. Your last root is mit or miss, which means send, and your first word is permit. As a verb, it means to allow, and as a noun, it means an official permission to do something. So don't forget there's those two different parts of speech there. So the sample sentences give you both. So as a verb, his parents permit him to stay out until midnight on the weekend, right? So permit there is allow. And then the sample sentence is the restaurant, so the sample sentence for the noun is, "The restaurant was in trouble when it was discovered that it didn't have the proper permits to serve food." So that permit would be that official permission. You get a permit to drive before you have your license, right? So you apply for your driving permit, and then you have permission to drive under certain conditions. Your final word is transmit, which is a verb, and it means to send forward or pass along. So you will transmit a message. You would transmit an email. You would transmit a letter. Here, probably this person is transmitting a text on her phone. And your sample sentence says, "The submarine's captain tried to transmit messages about his location, even though they might have gotten intercepted by the enemy."